Thank you, Ben, and thanks, Steph and Ryan, as well, for inviting me. Really happy to be here and to share these latest developments. So I'm not sure whether I should start at the beginning of the talk or the end of the talk. So the end of the talk is the more exciting part. So I'm kind of tempted to just go to the last slide, but let me at least go to the first few slides and then kind of play it by ear for there. So why develop Neurosift and AI exploration? So as we know, there's a large amount of neuroscience data available, which is great. Repositories such as the DANDI Archive, Open Neuro, eBrains provide a great service, but it's not always difficult to navigate these repositories, and there's barriers that are faced such as unfamiliarity with how to access the data, difficult identifying which are the relevant content, and this applies to me as well. So when I first kind of it was exciting that there were NWB files available for public download, which was a big step. This was when I was developing techniques for benchmarking spike sorting algorithms. And so it was exciting that that data was available, but it wasn't super easy to actually download and load it. And I thought, I've kind of been doing this for many, many years, and I'm sort of feel like I was done with downloading the data, writing a script, all that kind of stuff. Like files on the file system gets pretty difficult after a long time. So that was the idea of Neurosift. It's like, well, fortunately, DANDI has this data with an open API for querying the data, and then it's just publicly available on the AWS bucket. And so why don't we just stream the data directly from the browser? I probably don't need to deliver this slide, but we have many data sets that are publicly available on DANDI, and the NWB format is great because it standardizes how the data is stored, which opens up a lot of possibilities. And as I was kind of alluding to, why build the web applications? Well, it's less friction for the user. In my perspective, it's less friction for the developer as well, because when I'm saying, okay, let's test this out on a particular example data set, then we can just share links to the websites as opposed to saying, okay, let's coordinate on downloading this 100 gigabyte file, et cetera. So I think less friction in general is better science for all of these reasons here. So I have also had frustration when I'm trying to park my car in a parking garage, and then I'm like, okay, I got to catch the train, but I got to figure out how to pay for parking here. And then it's like I have to download an app. And actually, I have gotten scammed twice in the same way. So where I have to download the app. Okay, how am I going to download this app? All right, let me do a search for it. Top search comes up. It looks like it's the right app. Click on it, and then there's a big button that says download. So I click the download button, and then it says enter your credit card information. So I got to catch the train, so I enter my credit card information. And then I realize, okay, I've signed up for some kind of streaming service or something. And the same thing happened to me twice. So I'm a little embarrassed to say that. But I'm usually pretty careful and savvy, but they're really good at tricking you. And so we probably, a lot of us in this room have agree that creating a new account and creating a password is not something that we want to do typically. So what I really believe in is that whenever possible, you share a piece of data with somebody, they should be able to click on the link and then see it immediately without any kind of login. Now, it's not always possible if you have data that needs to be kept private or protected or other considerations. But fortunately, in this kind of sphere that we're in of doing research and open science and everything, it is a possibility to just have these things open. So a quick overview of Neurosift. So it's a browser-based visualization tool. Probably many of you are familiar with it. It allows you to explore DANDI and Open Neuro repositories. It works with local data as well as data stored in the cloud. So if you're not familiar, if you have a local NWB file and you want to use Neurosift, you can just go onto there's some documentation here that will just give you one Python command that you run, like Neurosift view NWB and the name of the NWB file. That will set up a local server running locally that it will give you a link to the website, which will then be connecting locally to your local NWB file. So it's kind of like a little standing on your head twice type of thing, where it's primarily meant for viewing remote files, but you can also use it for local. And of course, this was developed in collaboration with Ben and Catalyst Neuro. So before I go through all the features of Neurosift, it's just going to be kind of a walkthrough of the different searches and everything. Let me go ahead and skip to the last slide, which is, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this. So let's skip through. You can see the whole presentation. Okay, it's just not going fast enough. DANDI set. Okay, Neurosift chat. So as a companion to Neurosift, there's this app called chat.neurosift.app. So in some ways, I'm hesitant to tell everybody to go there and start querying because it does cost money. Like each of these queries to the LLM costs something. Fortunately, Catalyst Neuro has agreed to cover the costs for today at least. So we'll just keep an eye on how much is being spent, but if you all do like a reasonable query or two, it should be fine for now. But the reason I wanted to go to this is because if you are already very familiar with Neurosift, then you can be playing around with these tools, and then at the end of the presentation, we can go back to this list here, which is all of the queries that people have asked for. So you should be aware, it says it on the top of the page, like all of your queries will be saved for the purpose of improving. So I hope it's not, nobody posted anything weird or anything, so it's good. But yeah, so we're trying to improve this service. We want to know what people are searching for, and then the important question is, did Neurosift chat answer your question properly or not? So there's a thumbs up, thumbs down, which nobody uses. I mean, it's true, I don't click those either, but in this case, because we're providing this as a service, it would be great if everybody could get in the habit of clicking yes or no to whether it worked. So here's an example. This was the last one that was run. Somebody's interested in this particular DANDI set, and they said, okay, I'm interested in that DANDI set, so the chat responded with information about, chat responded with information about that DANDI set. Okay, I'm looking at the spatial series. Is this the location of the mouse over time? And then it did answer that question, I think. And then I wonder why this is, sorry about that. And the question was, okay, how do I actually plot the data with Python code? And that was actually beyond the expertise of this particular app. It did have some knowledge about PyNWB. So it gave some kind of result here, but this is not the preferred way to do it, to load the spatial series and plot it, because this requires downloading the file, which we want to avoid doing whenever possible. So the idea here, okay, how do I work out the location of the place field? So, wow, okay, look at all that code it generated. But unfortunately, you see, it's assuming that the file is right there on your machine. But it is possible to do all this with streaming. So this should be a thumbs down. Okay, it's a lot of stuff, wow. Okay, so maybe this did serve the purpose. I don't know if this was somebody here that was doing this, but if it was, did this help? Or maybe it's somebody on the different side of the planet, who knows? Okay, so Neurosift chat is good for searching for data sets in the DANDI Archive, Open Neuro, eBrains, and answering questions like which data sets have this type of data, or how many data sets have more than 10 sessions, something like that. But it won't get you to the point where it's actually writing code and executing the code. So there's a separate tool for that called DANDI Set Explorer. So what I'm hoping to kind of communicate here is when to use one, how to kind of go back and forth between the other one. So DANDI Set Explorer is, and again, I'm skipping ahead. This is also a chat interface where, but it's specific to one DANDI set, so you're not looking at the whole repository. And in this case, you can ask it questions and it can generate code which you can actually execute within. This is very annoying. I don't know why the connection is not quite right. Is it every time I scroll then it happens? I don't know. Okay, so in this case, I took the liberty of taking that question that somebody was asking and then going to DANDI set chat for that DANDI set, and then answering the question of how to plot it here. So this shows that the code that was used here is actually using this library called remfile. So this is a self-contained script here. If I copy that and open IPython and paste it in, it doesn't matter what computer I'm on, it will stream the data down and create the code like that. So what I really believe in is self-contained scripts whenever possible that you can just send to somebody, they can run it, and it's exactly the same thing. So that's the idea. Any questions so far? Who has used the DANDI Set Explorer, just out of curiosity? Okay, you use it. Has it been helpful? Uh-huh.
But then it was like successfully able to find out where it was, because I think it's a result of like doing suit2p, and then things are stored slightly differently. Okay. And then like successfully signpost me to the relevant place and how to do like a very basic plot. Mm-hmm. So I find that really amazing.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the idea is that this assistant has the ability to probe the NWB files themselves. So it knows what are the contents of it, and as well as it has template scripts or boilerplate scripts of how to load all of the NWB objects. So because it knows that, you can ask it questions and it's aware of the content, right, without just having to read the descriptions of things. Okay, and who has used the Neurosift chat part? Okay, has it been successful? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thumbs up, okay, so far, good. All right, I'm curious, before I go on, I'm gonna check to see if anybody has, because I don't know, is this like spying? I'm not sure, but let's check to see if there are any other queries. Okay, well, nobody has tried it. So I encourage you, just go to chat.neurosift.app, and if you ask a question, then at the end of the presentation, we'll come back and see how it worked. But I think you're all afraid because Ben is paying for it, so you're like, I don't want Ben to have to pay for this. Okay. All right. Okay. So, sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is Linux, and yeah. Well, actually, it's not going to work because I have to be logged into Microsoft 365 or whatever. But thank you. Thanks for the offer. Okay, so you can do a basic search on Neurosift. So you just type in Whisker or something like that, and it will be exactly as though you had been searching with the DANDI website. So it just kind of duplicates that functionality. The next thing you could do is a semantic search. So you click on the semantic search button here, and then just put in keywords or phrases, or you can even paste in an entire abstract of a relevant paper or something like that to find data sets that are related to that. And the way that that works is it's a RAG technique where it converts your search query to a semantic vector, so a very large vector. And then each DANDI set has a vector associated with it that was pre-computed. So it basically will compute the similarity between your search term and all of the DANDI set search, vectors and find the top 10 or whatever that match closest. So this actually has been working very well here. Okay, so then the third type of search is search by neurodata type. And so in this case, I was saying you can select like labeled events and electrical series, and it will give you all the DANDI sets that contain both of those types in them. Next one is experimental search. Okay, this is another type of search where you can specify the contact person or the species or neurodata types that you're interested in, and it kind of takes the intersection of all those. Okay, so when you click on a selected DANDI set, on the DANDI website, you get a nice kind of overview of the DANDI set. And this is pretty much showing you the same information, it's just a different layout. And then you can click on any of these NWB files, which would bring you to the view for that particular NWB file. Just one thing to note here is that it is possible to attach public annotations and links to notebooks and things on the DANDI sets through Neurosift. So nobody aside from myself has used this feature, I think, thus far, but you can go through and follow the instructions. It would be helpful if you have a notebook that you've created. Well, you could submit it to the DANDI set notebooks repo, but if you would like to also provide a link in Neurosift, you can submit it there. So when you click on an NWB file within DANDI set, you get this NWB file view where you can browse the contents of the individual NWB file. So this is kind of the main novelty of Neurosift, is to be able to lazy load or stream the data from the HDF5 file, which is located remotely. So the technologies involved here were using a modified version of a library called, I think, H5 WASM, but it uses WebAssembly and web workers. And in the early kind of days of kind of proposing this to Ben, of thinking like, is it possible to get something that reads the HDF5 directly in the browser? It wasn't clear whether that was going to be efficient or feasible or whatever. So I remember just kind of like trying to create these WebAssembly scripts and everything and like just crossing my fingers. And fortunately, it turns out that a compiled version of the HDF5 driver in WebAssembly in a web worker is able to efficiently load the data. So, it was one of those things where it could have worked or could have not. And so I'm just glad that it ended up working. So where possible, Neurosift uses this software called Lindy, which I developed together with the NeuroData Without Borders team. And this is a JSON format for representing the HDF5 of NWB as well as ZAR. So this Lindy JSON files have been pre-computed for all of the public NWB files on DANDI. So this does speed up the initial load. If you've noticed on Neurosift, sometimes you go to a page and it loads very quickly. That's because it's loading the JSON kind of overview. And so you can search for Lindy on GitHub if you want more information on that. Okay, so going through some example visualizations here. So I prepared this notebook. This is kind of a clever trick here where it's a notebook that uses iframes as the output cells. I guess I'm not sure exactly why I did it this way, but on GitHub, if you have a notebook that has iframes as output cells, it does not render because I think there's some security concerns there about rendering iframe arbitrary website embedded in GitHub. However, there's this software that I wrote called NBFiddle, which is really useful, nbfiddle.app, where you can load a notebook and it does the rendering and it doesn't have the restrictions such as not allowing iframes. There are other things about NBFiddle that are unique. And for example, this link here, I could copy that and share it with all of you, and you could open it and immediately you would see the same thing. And it's an executable notebook. So kind of like Collab, but there's no login. So that's kind of like the crucial thing here. So you can share a notebook with somebody. They can then go and execute the cells and connect to, well, in order to execute the cells, you have to connect to a Jupyter server. So there's a configuration here, Jupyter config. So I've configured it to connect to a cloud Jupyter kernel, but you could also just run a Jupyter kernel locally, and there's instructions for connecting to that. So now I can run the cells of this notebook, and yeah, it is kind of strange that I'm just running the cell that creates an iframe of the Neurosift thing, but you get the idea. I could have actual code in here, such as the, oops, not that one. Okay, 2 + 3 is 5. But if I was on one of those chat apps and it created some code for me, it would be very easy to go to NBFiddle, or you could go to your own Jupyter notebook, whatever, paste it in and run it. But then you could save that to the cloud and send that link to somebody else, and they don't have to log in, and they can also run it. So anyway, so this notebook has basically highlights the different types of visualizations that Neurosift can render. So in this case, it's neurodata type of image. The second one is neurodata type images. So you can have like more than one image here. And each of these is its own standalone link where basically on Neurosift, you have the URL which points to the NWB file asset on DANDI. And then you can have this tab equals, and it's the path of the NWB object within that NWB file, and that's what's getting rendered here. Okay. So another thing you can do is view units from a units table, like as a roster plot. So let me open that one. Okay. So here's the raster plot. You can sort of increase the number of units that you're viewing, et cetera. And that can be synchronized with other views as well. And other views, electrical series. In this case, it's viewing 4 channels out of 384. And you kind of interactively scroll. I apologize for this. I see it out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, that must be so annoying to be watching that. So apologize. Okay. And here is an example of a peristimulus time histogram. So in this case, let me open that. We've selected a trials table here, as well as a units table. So the trials and the units, oops. And then we can open those together in a PSTH. And then you can select units as well as what variable to align to, et cetera. And you can, there's different parameters that you can fiddle with. Okay, spatial series, there's different plugins for viewing the position of the animal over time. Labeled events, image segmentation. So I think if you navigate to an NWB file in Neurosift and you go to one of the objects, it may or may not be supported by one of the plugins. So if it's not supported, then do as Ben was suggesting and go and open a GitHub issue and say, okay, I'm trying to visualize this data, and can there be a plugin for that? Okay. Okay, so there's one powerful feature that not many users know about, but I think it's kind of cool. So I'm going to show how that works. So if you go to a units table, you can view the raster map, the raster plot, but it could also be useful to view like a heat map of the firing rate over time, right? So you can click this button called Submit Multiscale Spike Density. So if I click that, it tells me to run a particular Docker command. So what's happening here is that Neurosift doesn't have like a running backend that has compute resources or anything. Everything is done on the client side. So if we want to generate something based on like a Python script in order to visualize, I would have to kind of have some kind of cloud infrastructure in the backend. And it could be pretty expensive because there's thousands of these NWB files and many of these objects. And so my solution, at least for now, is just have the person that wants to view the thing run it on their machine. So see what happened there is that there's this Docker command. As long as you have Docker installed, you just run that on your local machine. And what it does is makes the computation and sends the output up to the cloud so Neurosift can access it. Now, this involves some degree of trust, right? Because it's, how do I know that you didn't compute the wrong thing intentionally and hack it and then upload it to the cloud, and then Neurosift would be showing the wrong thing? And I haven't solved that problem, but what I came to kind of believe is that that shouldn't get in the way of being able to do this. So if that makes sense. So now we go back here and refresh this site and click on the units. And now we have that spike density plot in that way. And so there's another command that you could run with a Docker called submit raster map sorting, and then you could have it sort the units by that. So that's just one example of a computation that you could do. But if people are interested, I think it would be really cool to add additional scripts to build those into Neurosift so that people could contribute their own visualizations to the system. All right. Does it sound interesting to anybody? Yeah, okay. Okay, so Neurosift also has an HTF5 browser, so in addition to seeing the hierarchy of the neurodata objects, it also allows you to kind of go in and see the internal structure of the NWB file. There's also a tab of time series alignment, so you can kind of view an overview of the start and end time of all the time series objects in the NWB file, which is useful. There's also another tab that probably nobody will use, but it's still interesting, which is the specifications tab, where you can see internally what are all of the definitions of the different NWB data types. So it can be really fun if you're like me to kind of view that stuff, but probably for practical reasons not that interesting. There's also a very convenient Python usage script. So if you're in an NWB file, you can go and to the Python usage tab, and that will give you a script of loading all the different objects in the file. So this is not necessarily a nice thing to paste into your notebook because it really does load all of the objects. But what this is useful for is if you go to ChatGPT and you want it to generate some code for you, you can paste it in there, and then it knows how to do the thing. And this same type of script is what powers the Dandy Set Explorer, so it gets an example of how to load everything. Okay, so now I'm getting to almost the last slide again. So if you're on a Dandy set and you want to explore that Dandy set using the chat interface, you can go to the lower left part of the window to the experimental chat link there. And then I'll show an example of that. So this is kind of like NB Fiddle in that you can configure the chat to be able to use your local Jupyter kernel. So when you're chatting with it, I could have set this up in the traditional way where it needs to execute some code, and so there's some cloud resource which it sends the request to. The difficult thing about that is that sometimes you require a decent amount of RAM to run the thing, as well as you need specific libraries installed, et cetera. So what works a lot better is if you can have this agent have access to your local Jupyter kernel. So if you go to the Jupyter config, just like I showed in the NB Fiddle, you can point it to your locally running Jupyter kernel, et cetera. So here's an example. Tell me about this Dandy set. What are the names of the NWB files in this Dandy set? So in order to know the names of the NWB files, it wrote this snippet of code here, which is using the Dandy API client. And then it executed it using my Jupyter kernel. By the way, you can also use Dandy Hub with this as well. So what types of data are in the file? Okay, then it goes through and tells me that. Let's load a particular piece of data, and then the output of that script is embedded here. Or you could take, and again, I like to do this kind of thing, so you copy that script, IPython, paste it from any computer, and then you get the output there. Okay. Okay, and now we're back to the Neurosift chat. And I don't know, I'm just curious. Let me go, go back to the, see if we have any. Okay, cool. And did people use the thumbs up? I knew it. People didn't put thumbs up or thumbs down. It's just human nature, right? We don't provide that feedback. Except one person did. Okay. Find some nice Dandy sets that contain open field and VR sessions. Okay. So what this did, so this Neurosift chat has access to various tools in order to kind of probe the Dandy archive. And one of the tools that it has is semantic search, which is the same as what Neurosift has. So in this case, it probably called that tool and returned that list of Dandy sets. So it says, I performed a semantic search across all Dandy data sets. But you can ask it other cool things such as find, let's see, how many Dandy sets have fewer than 10 sessions and do not have electrical series. And so what it does, this is an example of a very weird query that you would do. But what it's doing here is it writes a script, a JavaScript script that gets sent into the cloud, and then a job runner that has access to a pre-indexed version of the whole Dandy archive. So it can go through and learn all basically iterate through all the NWB objects. And then the job runner runs that script, gets the text output, and then sends that back to this interface. And then the chat agent can use that information to then respond to the question. So it's extremely flexible in terms of what questions you can ask, because it basically can write complex scripts. So in this case, the output of the script was this, and then it gave this very nice graph, number of DANDI sets with different number of sessions, all of those that do not contain electrical series. So, all right. So with that, thank you. And happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
How would you feel about combining the different chatbots?
Yeah, I think it would be. I think that would be a great thing to do. So notice that like OpenAI and ChatGPT, they still haven't fully combined all their things, and I think it's just basically a hard problem because these two, the DANDI Set Explorer has completely different tools than the Neurosift chat. Like they're, in all ways, they're different. So one of them's generating Python code, the other one's generating JavaScript. One of them has access to the Python kernel, the other one has access to semantic search, et cetera. But yeah, I think it would be cool to be able to transition kind of seamlessly from one to the other.
Could one call the other?
Well, yeah. So like a sub-agent type of thing. Yeah, but I think that typically you would want to be in the conversation, want the ability to be in the conversation of the sub-agent. Like if you're plotting something and it didn't come out quite right, you shouldn't necessarily be talking to the parent agent, but somehow have the ability to kind of go into that sub-chat. Yep. Thanks.
Sorry. Wow. Okay. I'm glad you aimed that way because I would not have caught it. Thank you. Right. In terms of the cost, like I think the one I did was like 50 cents. The one 57 cents. Right.
Yep.
In terms like in the future, if a user is using it, I guess who is going to pay for it? Where the tool is open to the public, I guess. Like how would this work?
Yeah, so there's the ability to provide your own open router API key. So if you have an open router account, which is very easy to get, you put in your credit card, you can put on like $20 or $30 credit, and then you can paste that in here. So I think that's one way that it can work. I think a good approach is to have like a quota per day that we just provide. Not sure exactly who would pay for it, but and then if the demand got too large, then we do something else. But right now, there's not really many people using it. So
yeah. Something to follow up, like once say the authors are sharing their data, would it make sense for them to run this and they can fact check it and maybe just have a new, like a combined document so that's out, so this doesn't have to be repeatedly run?
Oh, you mean have the person who contributes the DANDI set do the chat and then publish that chat?
Yeah. And then along with some.
Yeah, it's along the lines of what we were thinking of.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yes, I have to deliver it.
Okay. Yes?
It's a practical question because I want to submit and get this visualization.
Oh, here's the.
I have to set my Neurosift API key, and I submitted the form actually 2 days ago or yesterday.
Oh, you did?
But
Okay.
I don't know what is the process.
Oh, I'm supposed to be getting a notification email, but maybe I missed that. So yeah, so the question was, she wanted to submit a job for Neurosift, right? Mm-hmm. to compute the spike density map, and the procedure is that you fill out a Google form, you get the API key, and then now you're a trusted user, and then you can upload. And some reason the email didn't get through. So
I can resubmit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and one other thing, on the DandiSet Explorer, it's set up so that the GPT 4.1 mini is free. Well, it's free for you, so it's a very small amount. But it's recommended that you use GPT 4.1. It gives much better results, in which case you do have to put in your own Open Router API key. So for the Neurosift chat, that's going to be like covered for now for like a certain number, certain dollar amount per day. But that's not true for the DandiSet Explorer. That generates the code and everything. So at least at this point. Okay. All right. Thank you.